All right, good evening. First of all, thank you guys for your flexibility and patience on moving this back night. Seems like the last few weeks I keep having things that popped up on me that I scheduled several months ago in advance. So um, I appreciate your flexibility. And as I mentioned in the email, I always record these. So for the ones that couldn't make it tonight, I'll pop it up on Blackboard. So coming off norm reference test report, those were submitted, got all those pretty much graded and uh, feedback to you and grades recorded. So moving into the CBM, just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that as we move forward, to kind of go over some basics of curriculum-based measurements. And also, I'm going to go ahead and kind of talk a little bit tonight about the portfolio because there are two things I kind of want to address quickly before we really get into that. Hopefully, I think it may help some of you out. I've gotten some emails just since last Sunday when the norm reference report was due. So, um, number one, I've gotten some emails, concerns that perhaps maybe the students that you're working with, due to unforeseen circumstances, um, whether it be long-term discipline situations or hospitalizations, whatever it may be, uncertainty as far as availability to those students, and you've been working with one up to this point. Um, I'll go back to a comment I made earlier in the semester. If you have to use multiple students, that is not a deal breaker. So that's permissible. So don't stress over that, especially with it being some unforeseen circumstances. The one thing, if you are going to change students, that you'll need to make sure you do whenever you complete your assessments for this particular assignment, you just need to make sure that you change the background information in your reports. Because if you've been using that same student, you could pretty much just copy and paste and use that same information in your assessment report. So just make sure if you do switch students, that you'll want to update your background information when you do your report writing and submit that. So if you do need to change, that's fine, no problem. So don't stress over that. Another kind of question that I've noticed coming in, and I'm going to offer this for you, but I will point out maybe the pros and the cons about having enough time to get the data collected on the CBM and looking at where we're at in the semester, and fearful that maybe you won't have enough time to do enough assessments to get the data points. And so I'm willing to extend that due date. And if you so choose to do that, that will be fine. And I'll give you all the way up until Sunday, the 28th of November. But the con to that, or the negative side, is that's going to bump you right up to when your portfolio is going to be due. And if you look at the syllabus, I strategically had that due on a Monday, the week before the semester is over. So if you choose to use the extended due date for the CBM, which if you do, it's fine, I'll give you to the 28th of November. That gives you a couple extra weeks from when it was originally due on the syllabus. Is everybody with me so far on that? But with the understanding that you guys realize, if you choose to do that, you're going to have an overlap with that CBM on that 28th, and then the very next day that portfolio would be due at 4 o'clock on that Monday. The reason that I schedule that portfolio assignment to be due at that time before the semester ends is it gives me adequate time to review all the video mock IEPs. This semester, between the section, I've got right at 100 students. That's a lot of videos to watch in a short amount of time and score it and get it submitted to Fort Hays by the grade due date. And so I always allow myself that time because I know I'm going to have a lot of videos to go through. And if you look, the recommended time on the video was 12 to 15 minutes. So if you maximize your time and use 15 minutes and multiply that by 100 students, that it takes me a little time to get through it. So just please note, if you choose to do that, it's going to kind of overlap. Okay, if you want to go ahead and stick with your original due date, according to the syllabus, that's fine. You can go ahead, if you get your data and your report written, you can submit it. Okay, is everybody good with that, or do you have any questions, or did I just totally confuse you?
I have one question.
Okay.
If we do choose to extend, do we have to notify you that we are doing that?
If you could just shoot me an email and say, hey, Dr. Bosey, based on your conversation in our Zoom session, I'm going to elect to use that 28.
Okay.
Just so I know, it gives me a heads up. And if you go ahead and submit those, if you noticed on your assignments, if you've submitted early and I see that, I'll go ahead and start reviewing those and score them. So some of you guys that submit them early, you've noticed I've gotten your paper reviewed, feedback to you, and graded and posted already. So I will do the same on those, especially with the portfolio, knowing it's going to be time consuming with that many. I try to just stay ahead of it so I'm not having to scramble and try to rush through it at the end. So yeah, if you do select the later date on the CBMs, I just ask that you please just shoot me an email that you're going to elect to take that option. And that's fine if you do, no problem. Okay, I just wanted to provide that flexibility for you. I know some of you guys may be in some circumstances where you're pulled multiple directions and it's kind of tough. Everything might be piling up on you. So I just wanted to offer that flexibility for you, okay? Before we move on, just kind of address those couple common questions that I'm seeing. Real quickly also, just some common things that I'm seeing popping up real quick, and it strictly may be oversight, and I've been pretty flexible with you. If you email me, and I'll say, and is if you forget to submit your permission form, I've given you guys that option. It was like, hey, just shoot me a copy of it. But make sure if you're changing students, if you are changing students for the CBM for whatever circumstance, make sure that you get an updated permission form for that student. If not, and it's the same student, please make sure to go ahead and upload that same permission form and send it. Okay, even if you're using the same one. That's a common thing that I'm seeing that different ones are forgetting when they submit the report. Another thing is make sure that you check your charts, graphs, and tables section. Sometimes different ones are overlooking that, and that's where a lot of your points for those assignments are in that test interpretation section. So please, before you submit, make sure you go back and make sure you've addressed those areas, because that's another common area that students are forgetting to include. So I just kind of wanted to point that out right here on the home stretch. Just more of a courtesy reminder than anything. Okay, is there any question on that? No, everyone good? Okay. CBMs. Okay, there's a range of flexibility here. Really, if you look at the criteria for curriculum-based measurement, it's really another informal type test. And we're going to go over some of the specifics. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment. It's really just an extension of an informal test. And basically you take the screener and you're going to use it multiple times, and you're going to determine basically where your baseline is with the student. Then you're going to also project and create an aim line, what you anticipate their achievement should be, just based off the first 2 to 3 administrations of the CBM. And you're going to display that in a graph. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen quickly with you. We'll go over some of the highlights on the PowerPoint where it breaks this down. Can everyone see my screen? Everyone good?
Yes.
Okay. So this particular presentation can be found in Blackboard, and you'll see it really listed as it's shown as chapter 6, and it shows it as curriculum-based assessment and other informal measures. And hang on just a minute and see if there we go. So basically, it's an assessment model that we use for prevention and early intervention, and we use it to prevent students from falling behind, and it gives you the opportunity to closely monitor their performance on an ongoing basis. So basically, we're looking here at curriculum-based measurement. It monitors their progress, and we're going to do it frequently. If you notice in the syllabus, we ask you to obtain 6 data points to display. Okay, so by me expanding and giving you the flexibility to use that extended time should give you plenty of opportunity. Even if you have to go in and do on one particular week, you want to go in and give the assessment twice, maybe one on a Monday if you have to, and then come back on a Friday and go back and reassess them to get another data point if you have to. Also, when we look at it, we're trying to determine what their achievement goal is going to be for the year. And it also gives you the opportunity to find out, as the teacher in the classroom, the opportunity to monitor that individual student's progress and making sure they're making adequate gains. And if they're not, it gives you the opportunity to just kind of stop, go back, make some adjustments, and then re-administer some of the screeners to see if perhaps it was too difficult or over their ability level, their current ability level. So looking at effectiveness of curriculum-based measurements, they should be sufficiently reliable. They can be teacher created. Okay, so that's why I say it's basically an extension of informal assessment. You literally, as the classroom teacher, can go in and create them, the curriculum-based measurement. We're going to look at some guidelines in just a minute on how to kind of score that. The results that you gain should be easy to explain to others, especially if you're bringing the parents in to meet with them or other school personnel, maybe some other teachers that share that student you're working with. It's a quick snapshot view over a period of time that will display the progress and also show the different points if you have to go back and make adjustments. And you should be able to lay that out, explain it to your building principal or the other team of teachers that are working with the students. Another thing, since CBMs are used throughout the year, they do not have to be long, detailed, and extensive. And you don't have to go out and spend a lot of money. It's not like going out and buying a WJ4 test kit for your district. You're going to have to spend $4,000 on it. Okay, it's just like the informals you did earlier in the semester. Very inexpensive. A lot of you created your own for that, and you were able to kind of get some basic information. For those of you that are looking at reading, you can use CBMs to check reading fluency. You can also do it for comprehension. Fluency probes, just talking about fluency. You can use grade level passages that the student is currently utilizing, maybe a unit that you're studying in reading. The student literally can go in and read that passage orally for a 1 minute period while you simply record the errors. And then you're going to go through and count the number of words read correctly per minute and look at the accuracy rate. If it's comprehension, looking at a maze activity, students are given a passage. It contains missing words, and then they're going to go in and select some word choices to put in that to make that comprehensible. So a lot of you guys that teach reading, I'm sure, have done that. Often refer to that also as a closed testing. Does that sound familiar to anybody that's taught reading? See some of you shaking your head. Within this PowerPoint, and I would challenge you to go back and use this as a resource when you're doing fluency, to see what is expected amongst students at various grade levels, especially whether it's in reading, whether it's in math or spelling. There are recommended weekly growth goals for students. You'll see it provides you the grade level of the student. What is the realistic growth rate at that grade level? Then also, if they're already receiving services for special education, then also in the general education. So it gives you the suggested weekly growth for reading as far as when we're looking at words. The next item is looking at determining fluency. How do we go in and determine and calculate that to come up with their baseline and also their aim line? So when we're looking to determine a baseline, the student basically is going to read 3 passages orally, you would count up their errors, and then you're going to go in and calculate and come up with what is considered to be the median score. And that median score essentially is going to be your baseline to start with. Then you're going to establish a goal and you're going to plot the aim line. And so you can utilize the table, the different tables within this presentation to determine what is reasonable increase per week, just like the one I showed you in the previous slide. And so you would go and see what grade level they're on and then see what the reasonable goal is based on their grade level and depending on whether they're in the general education classroom setting or if they're served in a special education classroom. And you would multiply that weekly growth by the number of weeks of the instruction to follow. So if you're going to do it in 5 weeks, you would multiply it by the 5. So if you have a second grade student, your baseline's 55, the weekly increase is 1.5, and you have 25 weeks of school left. And it shows here how to do your basic calculations. Does everyone see how they've done this? I'm kind of rubbing my cursor over it here. Kate, is that clear as mud to you, or is it?
Oh, it makes perfect sense to me. My question is what my question always is whenever I look at any of these. I teach high school,
Yeah.
not 8th graders or 6th graders, and every one of these, and maybe I'm not looking in the right place, but every place that I've looked for weekly increases for even quarterly increases, they go maybe to 8th grade. So should I be using 6th or 8th grade increases, or should I be using their instructional level?
Use their instructional
look at?
level. Yeah.
Okay, so if
That's
I've
what
got a student, even though they're maybe a 12th grader with an reading instructional level of 5th grade, then I
That's right.
should use this.
You
Okay,
use that, yeah, to base it. That will show their growth and it will show you their progress. And hopefully you're seeing them progress grade level. You're seeing that growth, even though they're a junior in a high school, they're down here reading on a 5th grade level. You're wanting to see if they're able to progress based on their current reading level. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Yeah.
Dr.
Dr.
Posey?
Posey, sorry,
Yes.
Jamie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we do need to administer these at their academic performance level, not their grade level.
Yes, I would suggest that because it's going to give you more of a realistic picture as to if they're making adequate gains based on their current academic level.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's going to give you more of a true picture if they're making adequate gains based on where they currently are.
Dr. Posey, is there a chart that goes above 6th grade then? Like,
I can find you some resources within this presentation here. The charts, there are not. I didn't see any chart that went above, but I can find some resources for you. Definitely. Okay.
thank you.
Any other question before I move on?
I have a question.
Sure.
What about increased charts for preschoolers?
Increase for what now? I'm sorry. I heard preschoolers, like starting on the pre-K level.
Yes.
Okay. That resource I'll have to locate for you as well, because if you look within these charts here, it's not going to start off on pre-K. So I can find the resources for you.
Great. That would be wonderful.
Okay. All right. And what I can do once I locate those, I can go in and post them under like 805 resources.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Dr. Posey,
Yes.
since this is an extension of the informal, is it possible for us to, if we, like, for my first one, I had 3 different readings, and then I could do 3 more and just add on to that?
Yes, you could.
Okay.
You could. Yes. To help you out. Any other question? As far as going back and using some of your informals that you might have used at the beginning of the semester, you could take those as your base and then add on to it, as Michelle stated. Any other question? Okay. So you'll see now we've kind of started with reading, and now it's giving ideas and suggestions for determining progress and spelling. So basically it's giving you the idea to go in and construct measures from grade or instructional level words. It's recommending 12 words for grades 1 through 3, perhaps 18 for grades 4 through 8. Okay. So if you wanted to try this, basically, if you have some high school level students and you're wanting to work with spelling itself, you could go in and add to that. So you can see in the grade span, first through third, they're recommending 12, and then they bump it up for the next grade range of 4 through 8. They bump it up by 6 words. So if you want to go and look at 9 through 12, you can increase that by 6. 6 words to add to that, and it'll kind of give you a base number for high school level if you chose to do that. Then scoring correct letter sequences. Basically, you're going to award 1 point for each 2 letters that are correct in sequence. Give 1 point for a correct beginning and ending letter. So there's an example here for the word time. Okay, you'll see T, T-I, I-M, M-E, and E. And so you can see there's 5 correct sequences in that, and then you would plot the number of correct letter sequences and the number of correctly spelled words on it. Here is the recommended weekly growth for spelling. You can kind of see it gives, again, they just include kind of what I would say the middle grade range. So going back to the pre-K question and or going back to that high school level, I can find those resources for you, but here, recommendations based on grades 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. You can see what is considered the realistic growth rate that are listed and suggested rates throughout those grade spans. Then we jump up to math. For those of you that are interested in math or have been working with math assessments, basically constructing measures from grade or instructional level. Again, you have that option, especially I would say, as I recommended a while ago, if your student is really below grade level, as perhaps Kate mentioned, maybe they're a junior in high school, but literally they're down on a 4th or 5th grade level, recommend you use that instructional level versus where they are grade wise. Recommending compose 25 problems, give them a couple minutes to complete those problems. We used to do this a lot years ago in after school programs, doing like I look at it similar to the Mad Minutes. Anybody ever use Mad Math Minute, where they have a sheet and it's got maybe 45 problems, and they try to work as many as they can in a minute. You go back and score it, and then there's a rating for them, and you try to increase their math fluency, basically, to math recall. So this is somewhat similar. You're giving them a couple minutes to go through and work the problems. And so basically you go through and you scoring the digits correct per minute. So you would deduct 1 point for each digit, you would give them credit 1 point for each digit correct. So if you have example 54 plus 21, answer 75. So there's 2 digits correct. And so you would plot the number of digits correct per minute. Does that make sense? Okay, so you'd have to go through there and plot and count the number of digits, actual digits they got correct in that 1 minute. Not necessarily the number of correct answers, but the correct digits, okay, is what you're going to be counting. Okay, it shows the next chart, shows the recommended weekly growth for math. And this is the number of digits correct per minute. Shows a grade level and the realistic growth rate again. Unfortunately, it's showing grades 1 through 6, so I will do my best to find those resources for you that shows if you're working with students that are below that 1st grade or they're above the 6th. Okay, so looking at a little bit of the research with curriculum-based measurement and progress, noticeable effect on academic achievement when you take results and you use it to modify your instructional planning. Okay, so we can go through and do the assessments, count up and plot it, but are you going to actually take that data and that information that you've collected and use that to go in and change instructional planning. You're going to notice after your first 2 to 3 data points quickly whether that content is at the appropriate instructional level. Once you see that, you've got data collected already. What adjustments do you need to make? Okay, so it's very important to do that. It could also tell you, hey, as a classroom teacher, Johnny Joe's doing real well. I need to set some higher instructional goals. This right obviously might be too easy for him or her. Also gives you that opportunity to provide more feedback, gives you the opportunity to modify your different instructional techniques to determine or predict what some future performance might be on high stakes tests. One thing about this that I think is very beneficial is if you're applying these CBMs to that student's weak area to really hone in on those skills and try to strengthen them and get them up closer to grade level, especially as you get into high stakes test season that they may face in the spring, some type of formal assessment. It also gives you more information in determining eligibility for special education. These are some things you could do. Again, I keep saying it's really an extension of informal assessment. It gives you some quick snapshots over a longer period of time. We're taking, anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks on this, depending on the time frame, to collect data points. So this is another piece of data that you can take to the table if you are suspecting that a student might qualify. And so you're going through these steps to determine before you ever get to making the final decision whether you do or don't need to formally assess this student for special education services. Okay, gives you another tool to determine whether they really need to be tested. Also, a lot of times teachers and students, they like the CBM a little bit better because you're able to make those tests. You have that flexibility to design them. And really, the CBM falls into the category of a criterion reference test. The criterion is that you're checking that student's knowledge against the information that he or she is currently learning, and it's assessed against that student. It's not compared, that student's score is not compared to a group. It's based on that individual's ability in the here and now based on the content that you are covering. Okay. Any questions kind of over some of those different research points that I covered? I like the CBMs myself personally because it gives, again, I mentioned, it gives you that flexibility. You know exactly what you're covering in that room, and you want to go informally assess that student over a period of time to make sure that he or she is adequately gaining the knowledge and the information off the objectives covered, or going back and assessing skills that the student has been known to be deficient in, and you're trying to bring them up closer to the appropriate grade level to where they're actually placed. So I like the flexibility with the CBMs, especially from the classroom teacher standpoint. Any
Dr.
questions on
Posey?
that? Yes.
What about, okay, we looked at reading, fluency, comprehension, spelling, and math. What about writing? I know there are CBMs for writing. I mean,
Sure.
I've administered some,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
is there any place where you can find a growth chart for writing?
I
'Cause
can. I
that's
can
a-
go out and search for that and also post that as a resource for you as well. I'm making notes here. So I need to find some suggested growth rates for writing as well. Anyone else besides Kate focus on writing skills? Or any other maybe skill that hadn't been mentioned that I could obtain some resources to help and assist you as far as suggested growth rates. So I know I need them below first grade because, as mentioned, pre-K, and I obviously need them over the 6th to 8th grade range as well. I think those were a couple common ranges that were left out of the existing scales or charts that I presented to you in this PowerPoint. Is there any other area that I need to obtain some additional resources for any of you?
Well, another question I had was the maze exercises for comprehension. Now, the only place that I have found the ability to really create one is using Intervention Central. I think, you know,
Yep.
however, I don't know, when it just seems like when I create the mazes in there, because they take out I think it's every third word, which to me, it just seems like most of the time it's a and or the.
Yeah.
And there, so
One,
I don't,
one,
I can't tweak that so, you know,
one thing you might consider, Kate, is finding a passage that you literally can copy and paste into a Word document. Then, as an instructor, save that Word document, title it, and then you have the ability to go in and omit what particular words you would want, and then you would have to create those 3 choices to offer them. Does that make sense?
it does. And I wondered if that was a valid,
Yeah.
does
If
it
you
have
do,
to be at like every 5th or can it be one word a sentence, but maybe, you know, one of the more important words in the sentence?
I would mix it up.
Okay.
I would
Okay.
mix it up. That's kind of goes back to the flexibility of the CBM. It gives you as the instructor that flexibility. You might want to kind of get your baseline kind of started off on a level for that student to where it's not going to be overly difficult, but it's not going to be overly simplified either. You kind of want to find that happy medium to start off. And so you having that flexibility, you need to keep that in mind when you're creating that first maybe 1 to 2 maze assessments. And then based off that baseline, you'll know, okay, I need to increase the level of difficulty as we go. And that gives you that flexibility. You're copying and pasting and creating that document, whether you need to do 1 word per sentence. Do you need to mix it up? Put a couple sentence, simple words, and then, maybe 1 main word that is kind of out of the norm to see if they pick up on it and can identify it.
So how then do you compare the scores? Do you just do it as percentages rather than
Yep.
raw scores? Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions so far? Don't want to keep moving without clarifying anything. Okay. Looking at the teacher-made criterion reference test, I mentioned this falls into the category really of a criterion reference test because you're assessing that individual student based on their knowledge of the existing material that you're working with. So basically, it allows you as that teacher to directly link that assessment to what is currently being used within your curriculum. So it's relevant to what they are doing right now as well. Okay. So that again, that's one of the advantages of the CBM. Okay. So when the test you create is directly linked to the curriculum, it also is considered a curriculum-based assessment or direct measurement of what they're learning. So I mean, those all go hand in hand. Okay. And it provides great relevant information to what they are currently working on. It gives you an idea of their achievement level and their ability to grow. Okay. This is a chart or a slide to just give you some suggestions here when you're developing criteria and things to think about. And this isn't necessarily right now for this class, it's just in general later on. A lot of times on criterion reference test, I'm just talking about years ago, a lot of your state testing was criterion referenced. I know here in Oklahoma it was years ago, and then they switched back to norm reference. But the criterion reference basically, and I'm gonna use Oklahoma as an example going back several years ago, basically for the student to be considered proficient in passing the CRT test, the state tests that were CRTs at that time, 70. Anything below 70 was not sufficient for the student, and it wasn't technically considered passing. Okay, so 70 is kind of the cutoff on that for the CBM, or I'm sorry, so talking about the criterion, getting 5 out of 7 items correct, more than 95% mastery of the objective, or 90 to 95% is considered the instructional level. 76 to 89% is considered difficult. And then for this, anything less than 76 was considered failure on the 5 out of 7 items. Okay. But going back to the state assessment that used to be criterion reference, you know, the reading might have been 50 questions. So 70% or less was considered inadequate, not sufficient. The student was considered non-passing on it. Okay. Considerations to think about: does passing the test mean that a student is proficient and will maintain those skills? Something to think about. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a guarantee, right? We all know that. If the student is ready to progress on to the next level in the curriculum, it kind of gives you an indicator, especially if you were to do this ongoing over a longer period of time versus the condensed version that we're doing over 4 to 6 weeks. You noticed earlier in one of the slides, one of the examples on how to calculate, it gave an example of using it over the course of 25 weeks. Gives you a lot of data to look at, right? We're doing a small condensed snapshot version of it. So do you think it will indicate whether the student's able to generalize and apply skills outside the classroom? You think it'll give you an idea? It'll give you somewhat of an idea. And do you think it necessarily would be a strong indicator whether the student would pass the mastery test if they were given it at a later date? Okay, those are just things to think about, just questions to ponder on. Okay, if the student consistently scored just above that 70%, and then we were going to give them a formal criterion reference test to see if they could achieve mastery, but they've consistently been in the mid 70 to upper 70 range, are they going to be able to achieve a mastery level? More than likely, no, they're not, because they consistently scored in the mid to upper 70s, right? You can kind of see how that works, especially the more data you have to compare. So is there any questions over criterion or curriculum-based measures? The teacher-made tests, as I mentioned, which I think probably a lot of you guys, it sounds like maybe you're interested in doing that. Usually it will test the student at the knowledge level. And it also gives you differences between what students and teachers thought was important. It will give you those ideas when you go back and look at them. So any questions or concerns as we get ready to kick off the CBM portion?
One question I have is that, like, the new big push that they've just started is a letters program, which is kind of bringing back spelling and handwriting. So I was thinking of a spelling list because one of my students has to do like a 2nd grade sight word list. If you're going to chart that, though, I mean, I don't know that she could hit 95% of the first list, but then I moved to a second list. How does that alter? I mean, because if you're going to assess them, if you switch it up, do you see what I'm saying? Like, let's say I give her one list of 20 words and she manages to get those within the 6 weeks. then I could switch it, because I want to keep pushing her to go to more. Then the next
Right.
list, it might drop down, but do I just note that or how?
Yes, I would note it in your report. And
Okay.
also when you're writing up your report, you might want to, and this is what I've suggested in previous semesters. Make note when you're presenting the data in the report that based on strictly the 6 weeks worth of data or the 4 weeks or the 6 data points, that this is what the student has displayed, but also your working knowledge of the student, that your prediction is going to be XYZ, that the student may not be able to sustain that percentage level as the difficulty level increased. Or a lot of it's going to go back to some of your knowledge that you've gained off of giving them formal, and then also giving a norm reference and seeing what the student's strengths and weaknesses were in that time. And so again, you got to consider this is a small snapshot view. If you were doing this over 25 weeks, you would probably approach it a little bit differently, because you would have a lot of data points over, and it's going to be very obvious to you that you're going to probably hit the ceiling at some point. that
Okay.
You're going to hit the wall. Does that kind of make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, because the one I'm thinking of, I don't really see her mastering it, but at the
Right.
same time, you want to kind of keep throwing out the ones they know and adding new ones,
Oh,
which
definitely.
would
Yes.
alter the
Right.
results.
Right. Yeah. And just make note of that, even like in your summary or your conclusion, based on time spent with student A, this is the predicted performance or outcome over a period of time based on the data points you've collected.
Okay.
Man, I saw a tail pop up.
That's my desk cat. I have a cat who has to sit right in front of me when I'm on my computer. So yeah, and he stood up and stuck his tail in the air. I'm sorry.
Is there any other questions or concerns over the CBM? 'Cause
I am
Go ahead, Kate.
so okay, if I am doing, and it's my intent to do a writing CBM, and I've done the baseline already, but
Yes,
I don't have to have him write on the same prompt every time, right?
right.
I can give him a different prompt, and actually should be giving him a different prompt
Yes.
every time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other question? Yes, Jamie.
Sorry.
Sorry, go.
Sorry, Denise.
That's okay.
Are we allowed to, we can do, in my room, I progress monitor already doing like, money counting.
Mm-hmm.
So can I do that and also do like a reading passage fluency, like a 7-minute
Sure.
fluency thing as well?
Yes,
Is it okay we can do more than one?
you can.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Some of you guys also may have already been doing progress monitoring with the particular student you're working with. And if you have that data, go back and pull some of that data and use that to come up with a baseline and then build off of it. If you have concerns about having enough time to get all of this in within the time frame that we're looking at. Okay, so if you have concerns there and you've worked with this particular student and you've done that progress monitoring and you have access to that data, pull it and calculate your baselines and then build on it and go. Okay, does that help you out as well, Jamie? Okay.
Okay, so Dr. Posey, I just want some clarification. When you say 6 data points for the CBM, when you're doing a CBM, you have 3 passages. Is that 3 passages, 3 of the 6, or are you doing 6 different CBMs?
6 different CBMs.
So like 1 per week, basically.
That's correct, yes. And if, as I mentioned earlier, when I started doing the Zoom and talking about the flexibility and giving you that extra time, if you let's say you get sidetracked, stuff's going on at school and you're missing your student. In 1 week, you may have to come in and do 2. You may have to do 1 on a Monday, then you may have to come back and do 1 on a Friday if needed.
Okay.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I did it. I'm like, I can't remember who did a CBM. Michelle, I think, for our informal. So I at least have 1 done.
Sure.
So
Okay. Okay.
thank
All
you.
right. You're welcome. Real quick, one thing too, as we kind of get closer to the end of our time here, I just wanted to touch base on real quick, not bringing this up to try to confuse anyone, but also just kind of want to provide some clarity because it's going to be up on us before we know what's going on. Especially if you elect to use that extended time for the CBM. I mentioned that it would overlap with the portfolio. So I kind of want to talk just briefly about the portfolio and just kind of address some common questions that usually come up. So in the portfolio, it is for this class only. I know for the students that are just coming into the program and there's maybe been some confusion on a portfolio that's going to be required overall at the end. This is for this class and it's what I call a condensed portfolio. It's nothing to the extent of what's going to be required for the new ones that's entered the program at Fort Hays, if you're caught in with that group. Okay. Literally for the portfolio, and there is a portfolio template in Blackboard in this course shell. Okay. I would recommend you use that. I think it's very user friendly. Of course, I've worked with it off and on for several semesters, so it's easy for me to say that. So literally you're going to create an introduction section in that portfolio, basically just introducing the content that's going to be contained in the portfolio. That introduction does not have to be a big, long passage. It literally also needs to be as a paragraph of anywhere from 5 to 8 sentences, just an explanation, introduction of what's going to be in the portfolio. The next items that go in there in this order would be the lesson plans that you create off of each one of these assessment reports. Okay, so you're going to have a lesson plan and the templates for that lesson plan are in the SPED 805 resources section. You're going to create that lesson plan for the informal assessment report. You're going to create another lesson plan for the normed reference assessment report, and then you will create one for the CBM. After that, what is contained in the portfolio would be the mock IEP video. Okay. The recommended time on that is 12 to 15 minutes. And if you look at the guidelines in our rubric, or I'm sorry, in the syllabus, it gives you all the different things we're looking at in the video. Literally, if you will make yourself a cheat sheet and sit in front of you when you're creating that mock IEP and just kind of check off each line item as a guide when you're doing that IEP, you're going to be fine. Okay, use it as a guiding point. The mock IEP, literally, guys, you can do it sitting at home at your kitchen table, in your home office, in your classroom by yourself. You do not have to have a student sitting there with you or the entire team. But when you start off making that video, you need to do the introductions of the team, the parents, as if they were sitting there with you. I know they're not, you know they're not, but again, this is to give you practice on facilitating an IEP meeting. Okay. Is everyone with me so far on that? Okay. Again, you can do it anywhere that's convenient for you. Just pretend that they are there and introduce them. To my left, our building principal, Mr. Hoo-Hoo, and to my right, is Mrs. Susie Q, the regular classroom teacher, the school psychologist, Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. and Miss O'Connor, the parents of JT, and then go right into the meeting. Okay, it's that simple. That doesn't have to be anything more elaborate than that. Okay. Then go ahead.
I'm sorry,
No, you're
the
fine.
assessments that we're supposed to be addressing in the meeting,
Yes,
those are the assessments we've been reporting on, right?
exactly. Yep. The
So
ones
if we've
you've
been
done.
using the same student all the way through, then it should be as if we're reporting these assessments to their IEP, to their parents, etc.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay,
That's correct. Now, if you have had to use more than one student, select one of the two and just use that student's name. Okay, that's all you gotta do. And just, we'll go under the assumption that they did it all, they did them all. Okay, I know there's been circumstances come up where you maybe have had to use some multiple students. So when you get ready to do it, just select one of them and just address it as if basically you did all assessments on that student. Okay, and that's how we've handled that before in the previous semesters. Okay, so you'll go through all that IEP, then you'll close and conclude the meeting. Then you'll upload it into the portfolio template. And then you're going to go and create a conclusion section, just like you did on the introduction, and you're going to conclude the portfolio, give a brief explanation, and conclude it. Again, a short paragraph, 5 to 8 sentences. And that's literally the portfolio assignment. Okay. When you upload the lesson plans, you do not have to include the assessment reports you've already submitted to me that's been scored and sent back. You do not have to upload that. I'm just looking for the lesson plan. That's it. The template's provided for you. All you gotta do is go in there and put the information for each line item within that lesson plan template. And then upload it, title it as Michelle O'Connor Informal Assessment Lesson Plan, and upload it. Michelle O'Connor Norm Reference Lesson Plan, upload it.
So if I do my CBM as an extension of my informal, do I just need to do 2 lesson plans, one for the norm reference and one for, do I just mark it as informal and CBM?
Now you'll need to create one for each one of them.
One for, I
Yeah,
guess,
but-
and that's the part that confuses me, because if this is a mock IEP, I'm confused by the lesson plan portion of it.
Okay, so the lesson plan, basically, all you're doing is taking what you've identified as the strengths and weaknesses based on the data you've collected for each one of those assessment administrations. And you're gonna basically create a lesson plan to target those strengths and weaknesses.
So basically, this is the lesson plan that we would use during the week
Mhm.
okay. And
To go
then,
back and address the weaknesses that were identified.
so we could just basically use one of our lesson plans that we use.
You could. Yeah.
But,
It's going to ask you some information about, what technology would you incorporate? What's going to be needed as far as technology? Is it you're going to need a smart board? Are you going to need, just basic things like that? But it's going to ask you to provide some specifics regarding to the weakness that you've identified as far as instructional strategies that you would employ to address those weaknesses.
now, do you want to know what we would use if in an ideal situation, or the reality of my situation is I'm kind of shuffled from one room to another and I have to leave one room because somebody else is doing a group. And
No,
so I'm kind
real-
of I need a cart to roll around and then I do my lessons.
real world, I can't even say this without getting my tongue tied. Real world application based on your situation.
Okay.
Based on your situation, Michelle, your school, and Kate's is going to be real application based on her situation and Jamie's situation. If you're one that has to travel from room to room, these are the things that are going to be needed. Okay, does that provide clarity for you?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on the portfolio? When you hear the word portfolio, a lot of times you go, oh my gosh, this is something big and elaborate. It's not like the one that's required when you're finishing up the graduate program. This is a real small condensed version, although I would challenge you to save your video on like a flash drive for resources as far as artifacts that may be needed for if you get caught into that group that has to do it based on when you enter the program. That way you've got it. You've got it readily available. And something else that's interesting too, the mock IEP, what we have discovered, or what I've discovered by doing this class over the semesters, it's a great learning tool for you to go back and watch yourself in that video and you go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I did that. Or I need to maybe change this in my delivery method when I'm explaining that content. One thing I want to point out for you to make sure that you do in that IEP video, because when you look at the guidelines of what I'm going to be looking for, a lot of times students forget it, okay? And you've got all this readily available. You've already done it. I'm not asking you to go create the wheel again and create something new. But within that meeting, and you can do it a couple different ways, and it doesn't matter to me how you do it, just as long as I see you do it. It's going to ask you to present the tables and charts to display the data. I talked about how important that is through these assignments and reports, learning how to take the data you collect and display it, because sometimes parents, when we spew numbers to them, it goes right over their head. And that's a lot of information at one time. But if you've taken the time to put it in a chart, table, or graph, and you're sitting down at the table with them and they see it, it's a lot, sometimes it's a lot easier for them to understand. So when you're doing the mock IEP video, you could have it to where you can do a screen share and have those tables, charts, and graphs to where you pop it up on your screen when you're doing the video. Or you could literally have it right here. You hold them up as if you're pointing into the data. As long as I see that, you can do it like that. If you feel uncomfortable with technology and you think, oh, I don't know if I can get my screen to share properly and it's gonna mess my video up, do it the old school way, just like I'm doing right here. Okay, either way, but make sure that you are showing and addressing the data in the tables, charts, and graphs, and you've already got them. You've already included them in your reports. Okay.
Because I think if we screen shared, we'd probably end up showing proprietary information, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I've had different ones that literally they'll go and they do their video with Zoom. Literally is what they do. Is everybody with me still? Okay, there we go. My screen just kind of went wonky on me. I don't know what happened. So a lot of them will create their video with Zoom. They just create a Zoom meeting and they record themselves, and they'll have the charts and graphs already opened up, and they just do the screen share and the screen share, and it pops up the table, chart, and graph, and they continue talking and explain it. So that's one way to do it.
Okay.
Right there, to give you some ideas. Okay. Sometimes I will tell you this, just giving you a heads up. And a lot of times it kind of depends on what browser you use. And this is a common hurdle that we run into every year. It never fails. Students will try to upload their portfolio, and it's like it's hung up in Blackboard, and you just see it like it's trying to upload. It's like it's stuck. I don't know how else to say it. And you go back and you're like, oh my gosh, it's still in that mode, like it's trying to upload. We see this happen a lot if your web browser is Internet Explorer or Firefox. Either of those two, that's a common glitch that we see when it comes up time to upload your IEP video. If you are a Chrome browser user, very seldom do we see it. So I'm just throwing that out there just to, for you to kind of make note of and remember that. Another thing is sometimes if you're pushing upward of that 15-minute, if you go over a little bit, that's fine. Sometimes you have difficulty getting that video file to upload, even if you're using Chrome. We do see that sometimes. It's not very common. Another common way that you can share that video is if you go to YouTube and you upload it into a YouTube and then share the video link after you upload it into YouTube. So that's another solution there, and it's an easy way to share. You can literally cut or copy that YouTube link and then drop it in Blackboard and save it. And so when I go to it, I can just click on it and it'll take me to that YouTube channel. So for those of you that are YouTube knowledgeable and YouTube savvy, you might consider that. You could initially create the video with Zoom, save it to your computer, go to YouTube on your Gmail account, and then upload that into YouTube, create the YouTube link, and then drop it over into the portfolio. Does that make sense, or did I just totally confuse you? No?
It makes sense.
Okay. So remember that's an option too, if you see that it's having trouble uploading. Okay. Those are some options. And worst case scenario, you can if you're having trouble, I've even had students, after they've attempted it 2 or 3 times, they'll email me, they're getting frustrated, and I'll say, hey, just email me the video, and then I'll review it, and then I'll go in there and score it in Blackboard and do it like that. So we'll get through it. All you gotta do is email me if you're having trouble with it. We'll work through it. Any other questions? I just kind of wanted to touch base with you on that, as I know it's approaching, and I'll do another quick Zoom touch base before we get to that, just to see if anybody's having trouble creating that portfolio using that template. And I'll send out an email and give you guys notice. Go ahead.
Just to recap, the video IEP is the introduction, basically kind of the PLAF, and then the goals and the benchmarks that we've made, and then we can kind of stop there, and then we email the conclusion.
That's right.
Okay.
That's correct. Any other questions I could provide clarity on? I didn't throw too much at you in one night and your head sitting here spinning, did I? Again,
Personally, I'm glad you talked about the portfolio, because
I wanted to go ahead and
concerned.
kind of throw some things out there, plant some seeds, and maybe just offer any clarity. And as I just mentioned, I will send out another notice. Probably I will say 2 weeks before the portfolio is due, as we're kind of getting to the end of the CBM window. Just do a quick Zoom touch base, and I'll focus mainly on that portfolio again. But if you have any last minute questions on the CBM, I can take those as well. But just mainly want to give you that opportunity to provide clarity and answering questions as we get right there toward the tail end, because I know you guys will have a lot going on. It's getting to the holiday break, and just want to make sure you guys fully understand what we're looking for. And again, on that IEP, the really a lot of it too, what I'm looking at is the flow of the meeting. Okay, you have done the assessments, you've scored these, you've done your reports, you've created your charts, you know the data. I'm looking for the flow of the meeting, and making sure you understand the material, because, and I always say this every semester, you know yourself that there's nothing worse than going to sit in an IEP meeting and the teacher's not prepared, and they're thumbing around and scrambling, and they're not organized. And what kind of message does that send to the parents that are coming in? I always say that. What kind of message does that send? I think it's very important. You know the data, you know this student. We're looking for the flow of it. And I think that says a lot to the parents coming in when they see you as the special ed teacher that are organized. You've got the information in charts, graphs. You can present it not only verbally, talking about numbers, but you can also pop up charts and graphs and go and reflect the data that way and explain it. I think that sends a positive message to that student. So I'm looking for the flow on this and making sure that you truly understand that. And if you will use that criteria for this assignment under that video section, all those different areas, if you'll use that as a cheat sheet and you hit all those points, you're going to be fine. You'll do just fine on it. Okay. So it gives you that practice, but we're looking for the flow. That's really what I'm looking for. Okay.
Okay.
Jamie's taking big sighs and deep breaths. I can see her body language like, oh my gosh. She's like, ugh. Are you
It's
good,
just,
Jamie?
you know, it all piles up. So I have
know.
moments of freak out, and then I'm like, okay, one step at a time.
One thing too, and just looking ahead and in between your CBM administrations, what I would really challenge you to do is maybe pop up a lesson plan template and start working on that for the informal. Save it, do another one, maybe the next week for your norm reference, and go ahead and do that versus waiting to the very tail end and you're having to scramble and you get stressed and all that. I would really encourage you to do that. I really would, because your other reports are done. You already submitted them. All you got to do is go pull your information and transfer it over into that lesson plan template, create that. That's literally all you have to do. Okay. So I would really encourage you to do that. Take some time between now and before the CBMs are due to just kind of work on that, save it, and have it ready to upload. That way it saves you that stress at the end. You can just really focus on that video, setting down to do that. Okay. So give that some thought. Just kind of maximize your time between now and then, because you'll have a little bit of gap in there from the time you're given those CBM assessments. Okay, they're kind of spaced out. Okay, so consider that and think about it. Any other items, any other questions before we go?
So, Dr. Posey, can you please tell us the due dates again for the
Okay.
CPM and then the portfolio?
Okay, so the extended option that I have offered you for the CBM would be that Sunday, November the 28th at midnight, if you choose to do that extension. If not, the original, if you go look in the syllabus, I believe is November the 14th. Okay, either way is fine. The only thing that I ask of you as students, if you choose to use the extended time for the CBM, just please just shoot me an email. That's all I ask. Just give me a heads up. Okay. The portfolio due date is going to be the very next day on that Monday, the 29th, and it has a 4 o'clock deadline. It's the only odd time compared to all my other times. I always do them at midnight. So I can go ahead and get started, because like I said at the beginning of the Zoom, this semester I have right at 100 students between 5 sections. So it takes me a while to get through the videos and score those. And it gives me enough time before grades are officially due with Fort Hays. Okay, does that answer your questions?
Yes, I had myself all worked up. I was thinking it was like next week.
No.
Oh my gosh.
No. Your original due date for the CBMs
Yes,
was the
okay.
14th.
That's
But
okay.
yeah, if you remember, I'd had a couple shoot me emails and concerns and all that, and I even on one of my email responses like, hey, I'm going to address that. I'm going to go ahead and offer some extended time, but I just want to make sure you guys are clear. If you choose to do that, you're going to have that overlap right there at the end. So don't back yourself in a corner where you're going to get yourself in a bind. Just keep that in mind. Okay.
But you
All
can
right.
turn it in next week so he doesn't have to grade
Yeah.
anything.
Hey, yeah. If you want to turn it in. No, if you start submitting closer to that original 14th due date, and I see it sitting there, I'm gonna go ahead and start scoring them so I can kind of stay ahead of it. My personal goal doing these classes is if the assignments are due on Sunday at midnight, my personal goal for myself is to have everything scored and back to the students on or before the end of the day that Wednesday. That's always been my goal, and I try to do that. I work diligently at it. Sometimes it doesn't always happen, but for the most part, I can get them back. So I think it's important to score those and get them back just in a timely manner. I remember in graduate classes, sitting there and it might be 4 weeks before I got anything back, and you're sitting here, what mistakes did I make? I don't want to turn around and make the same one. So I just think it's important to get it back as quick as I can. So, okay.
Well, thank you, Dr.
All
Posey.
right, thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it. And as always, if you have questions come up, shoot me an email. Try to faithfully check those in the morning early, and then come back sometime after 5:30 or 6 and check them again, okay? Thank you guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye. Thank you.